Welcome to our podcast, Being a Digital Leader, the good, bad and ugly of digital transformation. I'm sure everyone's heard a lot about digital transformation, and unless you've done it, it can be quite scary and seem difficult to conquer. That's why we've set up this podcast, so that we talk to people who've been there, done that. And not only do we hear about how they did it and what they did, but how they felt doing it. Let's begin. Welcome to our podcast, Being a Digital Leader, the good, bad and ugly of digital transformation. My name is Simon Holden. I'm the Hub Exec for Scotland and Yorkshire, and I will be your host for today. And today I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Adam Hepton, People Experience Lead at Tombola, and James Locker, Club Exec at Digital. Today we'll be talking about the human side of digital transformation, so let's jump in. Adam has over 15 years experience in managing people, delivery and change within organisations such as Sky Betting and Gaming and Frog Education. Originally from a software engineering, implementation and management background, he made a deliberate career transition into people to focus on maximising the potential and growth of individuals and teams in 2019. He is currently People Experience Lead at Tombola. Hi, Adam.
Hello, Simon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. That's a very impressive intro. James. So James Locker is our club exec at Digital, and is a people and commercially focused leader in digital with more than 15 years experience driving cultural and transformational change in high growth organisations. He has worked in professional services for the last 10 years and has a background in delivery leadership in a number of different markets and industries, including media and gaming, financial services, utilities and commodities. Good morning, James.
Morning, Simon. Pleased to be here.
Good. Right, okay, let's kick off then. So, Adam, it'd be lovely to hear a bit more about Tombola and how you came to find yourself there.
Sure. So Tombola is part of the Flutter whole umbrella group, I guess we call it these days. Flutter being exactly that, holding company where most of the world's biggest gambling companies all are. Mm-hmm. And Tombola is one of the latest acquisitions, one of the latest parts of that. So I previously worked for Flutter at Sky Betting and Gaming, as you mentioned in the intro, and officially I'm still on secondment there at Tombola. So yeah, so I've been at Tombola for coming up to 9 months now. Okay. And as a new business to the group, it sort of sits in this place where it's neither part of an existing division nor being merged into an existing division. It's kind of like Jersey is to the UK. It's its own sort of territory with its own sort of governance, but also a lot of cultural alignment, I guess, with the bigger picture. So I came to Tombola on secondment to kind of look at the things that are in place and try and set themselves up for future success.
Wow.
As it goes. Yeah.
And I always get it wrong. Is it 12 or 13 companies in Flutter now, or is it?
You tell me, Simon.
Okay.
They grow at such a pace that it could be 15 by the time we're speaking.
Okay.
You know.
All right. Okay.
Literally across the world, there are so many. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That must be a really interesting challenge then, from a cultural perspective, when you're bringing together a number of different organisations that have either evolved their own culture, attempted to set a culture, or move and transition into something that's more aligned with the culture that already exists.
Yeah.
How have you found that?
So that has definitely been one of the consistent threads through the last couple of years, 3 years maybe in Flutter. All these existing cultures, all these different isolated cultures that are suddenly then potentially grouped together as one, and
mm-hmm.
Do you sort of sympathise with that? Do you look to bring the best out of all those existing cultures? Do you let them be?
Yeah.
These have been the questions that Flutter has. So yeah, it has been a fantastically interesting time for everyone working anywhere within Flutter. So whether you were previously a strong brand alignment going to a now new divisional alignment, or in the case of Tombola, being left to your own devices culturally for the greatest extent.
Yeah.
It's a different story, and I think that's kind of is fascinating because of the tens of thousands of people that work across Flutter now. Probably everyone has got a different story to tell and a different experience of how great or otherwise that has been for them.
Well, yeah, that's fantastic.
leading on from that, so your title, your role title, as I understand, is People
Sure.
Experience Lead, which I think is an excellent title. What does that actually mean, and what do you love about that role?
Cool. So, yeah, it's one of those titles where some businesses will have it, some businesses won't have it. It can mean a multitude of things, much like any job title. Any job title will mean a different thing in a different place to something. I'm really interested in what a club exec is.
James can answer that next.
We can talk about that.
Hopefully we'll align on what it means.
This is it. So, so in terms of what I do at Tombola, I look at what is fundamentally the experience for everyone working within Tombola and understanding what needs to be the same, what is better being different, what needs to change for everyone, what needs to change for some people, what should we do more of, what should we do less of, listening to our people, but also sort of being heavily aligned to what we need to achieve as a business, as a profit-making business, which unfortunately we all are.
Yep.
And aligning those kind of things. So it's looking at the people's needs, the people's wants, the business's needs, the business's wants, and making the right decisions and doing some really sort of strong analysis and strong insight-led decision making to do the right thing for Tombola and everyone who works within Tombola, as much as part of what is Tombola as what we do and what we make.
And you made a deliberate transition, a career
Sure.
step into that. So where's the passion for that? What was the kind of? I mean, you're obviously passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us a bit more about that. That'd be fascinating.
So, when I was in tech, I started out as a software developer. I liked taking problems and being able to solve problems. I then understood that potentially there's other people who are better at doing that than I am, and that actually what I could do better was try and make it so that those people could solve the problems better by getting things out of their path or by setting a better path for them to be able to work within as a people manager. Over time, I really sort of I became more interested in what the people were doing. Code's really interesting. Code is a fantastic art in itself. But fundamentally, if you write some code and you run it through an interpreter or an assembler or whatever, the same result will happen every time. Whereas I could say the same thing to you, and I could say the same thing to you, and you might completely have different reactions to it. And I find that fascinating, that it's not randomness, but sort of that difference between that true diversity of thought. Every human thinks differently, and so that is where I truly grew my passion. And I could have done that from a seat as a people manager, but doing it from a seat as a people manager, the level of influence is only around those that you are most directly involved in. So I was like, I'm enjoying this too much to only do this in what is a relatively small level of influence. I wanted more, so I moved into a more people-centric role, which is not a path many take, in order to kind of look at, as I mentioned earlier, the kind of real changes that we could do for the benefit of the people and for the company, the business itself.
Fascinating.
I love that. It's a great story. It really resonates with me as well. I think if I think about my background and sort of journey to the role I'm in now, some of the bits that I loved in more delivery was the people side of delivery, and galvanizing the team, bringing a team together to really orientate themselves on a particular goal, an end point. And I think through time, I didn't realize that at the time I was going through that process and that stage in my career. I just enjoyed delivery, or that's what I believed. And I think as that kind of evolved and I moved into more of a commercial role for a year or two, the role I'm in now, and you were asking before what a club exec does, it really encompasses all of that together. And I think that's what I really love about my role. It creates an environment where, for me to be successful, I have to get the balance absolutely right between the different levers and pull points I have, and the fundamental aspect of that is getting the people side of it correct. And that in itself is what kind of defines. If someone were to ask me, what do you love about your job? It's that bit, really.
Yeah, got you. It's I think exactly the same, James. It's like the influence that humans can have over a process or over doing something. It cannot be overlooked, and it's really the biggest multiplier that any of us have, is getting the right people in the right place doing the right thing. And when that all comes together, it's a truly sort of magical time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's really embracing that difference for me, because if all businesses were meant to operate in the same way, there'd be one business for all of us to work in. We'd all work for super mega corporate, you know.
Yeah.
We don't. We all work for different places.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what is a great place for one person is not a great place for somebody else, and vice versa. So it's finding that sweet spot of what is the best thing for us at this time.
And you as a people manager, knowing what clicks for your people,
100%.
what perks works for the people that you've got in your business.
Yeah, 100%.
So building on that, so we've got the people aspect, and then if we kind of layer on transformation, which every business has to go through,
100%.
and it's a non-stop. There's never really an end point.
That's
to that, is it? How would we define transformation here amongst ourselves in terms of what it is when we know the right time is to press that button on, let's go for it, and so on?
So for me, transformation is, in its simplest form, going from doing things one way to doing things a completely different way. And that can mean a minor transformation, as in we were using this version of software and now we're using this version of software. That's a transformation over type. To a complete overhaul of we were making this thing as a business and now we are providing this service as a business. And everywhere in between on that step. So for me, transformation is it's the kind of tacit realization that you want to do things differently and that you would like to go from X to Y. And that journey from X to Y can be a small thing, a long thing, and in most cases, it's probably never ending. Yeah.
No, very clearly articulated. James, you probably come across lots of different transformations across the client portfolio that you work with. Is there anything? Does everyone have the same perspective, or there?
I think. I mean, we work with different types of businesses, including our own. When I think about our own business, and everybody's going through their own style of transformation. If I think of And as a relatively new company, we had the opportunity to set something up from the very beginning. So you're setting its culture, you're setting its direction. You're creating a vision from which all decision making is then driven from. That is one thing to do it in that sense. It's a completely different thing to do it from where you are inheriting something. We talked before about bringing 12, 13 different organizations together. How do you transform that? How do you transform that culturally, digitally? That's an altogether different challenge. And I don't think it's every single organisation is going to go on one journey. Every single journey is very, very different, and that's the thing we find within all of our clients, because they've all got a different problem set.
Sure.
And not only they've got a different problem, they've got a different ambition as to what success ultimately looks like.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge for us, and I think that's the level of diversity that our people love to be involved with, because a different challenge presents a different opportunity for our people to engage with. And I think when we talk about what ticks the boxes of where people want to work, I think fundamentally within our business, that's what people enjoy, facing a different and varied challenge within each client or project or program that they're working on.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, and it's like those different variables again, like that diversity. And the people is one that it sort of hits you in the face immediately. The different types of people that you will have in an organisation will infer whether you could take this path, that path, another path, consider this thing or another thing. But then there's all the other things underneath, such as your history of how things have been, how tied you are into specific pieces of infrastructure and all that kind of thing. So even if you've got the same problem in two companies that on the surface look fairly similar, you can have a very, very different outcome or a different way of achieving that as you go. And it's all about those variables. And that's kind of why my technical background helps me with this kind of thing, because it is identifying, no, that is a variable, that is a constant. These kind of things can be changed. These kind of things are immutable. By doing this, we might see this, and understanding all those different sort of possibilities. Yeah.
One of those variables which I think is important in any transformation, particularly digital, which is where we're kind of all operating, is the kind of senior buy-in in terms of actually the sponsorship, the commitment, and so on. How do you achieve that?
I tend to find that most transformational, at least initially, the desire to transform comes from senior leadership, or at least it is. It's said that it comes from senior leadership. So they might stand and say, "We would like to transform. We would like to stop doing things this way and start doing things this way." In reality, it's not always what they say, it's sometimes what they do, and that's kind of the biggest challenge. It's one thing to say it, to on the surface believe it. It's another thing to breathe it. And I'm not being disingenuous about senior leaders at all across different businesses, but it really does come down to the role modelling. So the buy-in for me is not in what they say or what they think they want to achieve. It's really committing to it, and really sort of going ahead with what they believe, like backing their words with actions is absolutely imperative to that, and just really, like I say, committing to that. Don't lose sight of why you want to achieve the transformation, I think, is the key to the buy-in. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And commitment's a big word there that I can really resonate with. And recognizing that through that commitment, you're going to hit hurdles, you're going to hit bumps in the road that will have some cynics and some disbelievers challenging, was this the right thing to do? And I think the crucial point is to hold strong at that point, because it's great reiterating a message when things are going really well. When you hit that bump, when you hit that first hurdle, still having that belief and that forthright view that this is just a bump, this is the end goal. That's what's fundamentally important, because you can't allow the cynics to win just because you've hit that first hurdle.
No.
Because that's often where we see failure occur, where we slip back into the commitment is one thing. There's a behavioural aspect. So whilst the end point and the words remain the same, the behaviours begin to drift a little bit back into old style ways of working, without recognising we've even done it. And those are the things that we look for in terms of where things might go wrong in what the overall journey looks like.
Sure.
Is it fair to say that you've got to articulate the value and the benefits of that transformation, and typically the benefit comes more towards the end than right? You might get some quick wins at the start, so you've got to understand the implications of doing that transformation and actually what you can't have maybe during that time, because actually the focused energy is on that transformation. Is that a hard message to land, or is that kind of well understood when people pause and reflect? It's just in the heat of the moment that people maybe push.
I think there's a multitude of reasons why people can regress or deviate from what they're doing. I think it does come down to, it's like anything. If you believe in it, you are more likely to want to achieve it than if you have reservations about it, or you're not sure, or perhaps the time isn't right, or all those kind of things. So I do think getting the purpose is, it sounds very simple and very easy, but it really is the key to any sort of successful change, is understanding the purpose of that change, because it's much harder to argue against doing something if you realise why it is that you're trying to do it, and that you believe that you want to do it, and that you can see why. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Simon. It's never something that very few changes will go from being an idea to implemented and being successful immediately with immediate benefit and value. More often than not, you'll go through a transitional phase where the old way people want to continue doing the old way at the same time as doing the new way, and try and keep the lights on, the business as usual, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
That actually, that's another thing to kind of be mindful of. It may not be possible to do things in parallel and operate two different things. And even if it is possible, it may not be the right thing to do, because that makes it harder to undo later on.
Yeah.
So
I think the only thing I'd say, kind of a build up on your question in some respects, Simon, is the benefits coming at the end almost suggests that there is an end point for transformation.
Yep. Fair
And
challenge,
I'm not convinced that there is, and maybe this boils back into where my background comes from in delivery, and I do believe that as you're going through that journey, you can be proving points out. I think you can be building trust. I think there is plenty of data now, analysis, metrics that are able to support that. When I'm talking about some of those bumps in the road, the analysis around that supports that we're on the right trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
We remain on the right path, and I think that remains important when we're going through transformations of this type. But also beginning to recognise that this is not going to be a point where we get to an end of a project. We've got to kind of stop thinking about transformation as a number of different projects that we'll deliver.
Yeah.
There's outcomes that a business wants to believe and wants to achieve, and I think that's part of the transformation in itself. It's a kind of reverse and change within the language and the tone of delivery, and that comes from senior leadership, and that's where fundamentally you kind of see the buy-in and the belief from them in terms of not just saying the things, but continually stating those things and using the right language and consistency of that language kind of throughout that whole process.
Yeah, and I would agree with that completely. And it's not always entirely on the outcomes either. It's also almost sometimes the scope of things can be a success criteria as well. And being clear about that kind of thing. So being clear about the purpose is one thing, being clear about the expected scope and the expected impact. It may be that some parts of that transformation are not for everyone, and that it's not ever intended to be, but just being clear about that kind of thing can help drive the right changes. But you're absolutely right. It never ends. Yeah. Even when you think it ends, there's more to do, and it's another transformation beyond that. So
it's another evolution of it. Yeah. Just because you set a 5-year plan, it doesn't mean that 5-year plan is right in 5 years' time. I think the business is going to outsee that 5-year plan with a bit of luck.
Yeah, and, I think anyone who can predict 5 years should be doing something other than working on these kind of problems, honestly, because I think if you'd have told me in 2018 what 2023 would have looked like, I'd have been very surprised.
I think we've all been shocked with that.
Yeah, sure. So.
Okay, I'm not sure how to segue from that. But one of the strands of any transformation, I think, and reality of actually just the digital landscape we all operate in is upskilling, I think, and actually bringing people and evolving and developing them, whether that be in product, whether that be in technical, whether that be in all sorts of other things. In your role, how do you sell that need for upskilling? How do you kind of really articulate that, and how do you get the buy-in?
So with any desire to go from one thing to another, you have to analyse what are the things that need to happen in order for that to be successful. Invariably, generally, more often than not, they all mean the same thing, but it comes down to the people that you have are the assets that you have already.
Yep.
And the people that you have will have skills, will have motivations, will have capabilities of doing things that might mean that they can do the things that you want them to do. Now, it might mean that if the transformation is a very severe one, that actually the skills that you have valued in the past and the kind of capabilities that people possess and the motivations and the ways they operate may be completely diametrically not aligned with what you need to achieve, in which case upskilling is the wrong thing to do. And it is a question of potentially changing the people. But realistically, I would always argue that if you are trying to implement a change for your business, use the bits of the business that you already have and value and know well in order to achieve that. And to do that, you do need to invest in the people that you've got, or at least the people that you believe can fulfill the potential that you need them to in the future. I've never found that to be a particularly difficult conversation to have with senior leadership. If only that if they are truly aligned to that purpose and they are really clear about the benefits they can have, any business person will know that generally there will be a cost to this kind of thing and there'll be a benefit to this kind of thing. But most of that kind of cost will come in, what do we need to meet that gap? And if it is a skills gap or if it is a change in thinking gap, then it makes sense that that's where the investment goes.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there as well. A lot of when I'm talking to senior leaders with clients that we work with, and we talk about transformation, one of the things that we often refer to at the moment is the transition from an organisation that has a degree of knowledge about how its organisation works, and that no longer just being enough. You can't just know the ins and outs of everything and the fundamentals and foundations of how your company operates today. It has to be ready, and each person has to be ready to go on the journey, the evolution journey. And what comes with that is a different set of skills. So that transition between knowledge to skills is fundamentally important when we're talking about people. And that's not just their technical skills, that's their professional skills, it's their behavioural skills. They have to think differently and they have to be prepared to go on that journey with you. And if you're not, then unfortunately we're going to end up leaving some people behind. And that's all right too. You know, it's brave. And I do believe in what you're saying about investing in the people that are already there, but not everybody's going to be ready for that journey.
Absolutely right. I think you asked earlier, Simon, about is getting the senior leader buy-in. I think it's the colleague buy-in that's as important, if not more so, actually, for making these successful. And part of that is understanding whether this is a change that you can accept and get on board with, or that you can morph to and you can adapt to in the future. And it's a much nicer place where you can say, do you know what? This company wants to achieve this thing. That's not something I want to do. That's not something I'm either, ethically aligned to, or I don't have the skills to, I don't have the mindset to work in that kind of way. It's a lot easier if everyone's being open and transparent about that and being clear about where it is that we're trying to head to and how each of us fit within that. Because then it comes back to that. There are multiple companies to work for. There are multiple places to work. You don't have to stay here unless you really do need to stay here, and in which case we'd probably rather, try and make this work for you.
Is something we're talking about here about for the individual about a growth mindset. So we've all got a set of skills and capabilities, but life changes. Technology landscape changes. The companies change, and actually, it's whether, and maybe I'm paraphrasing, but we can all change. It's whether you want to change, whether you actually embrace it and recognise that is just a continuous change is the only constant. Is
I mean, it is a tough one because some people developing that growth mindset is a real challenge, and even people who might intrinsically have a growth mindset in the right set of circumstances, in a particular set of circumstances, can find it really difficult to actually get into that growth mindset if it goes against their core beliefs or it goes against their kind of the history that they've had with a place. People can become really attached to a certain thing, and if they believe that this is a good thing, this is a thing that has been successful for such a long time, how do you get into a growth mindset in that set of circumstances when you don't? It comes, there's that phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. For a lot of people, they don't necessarily see that things are broke. So why would you fix it? And I guess with any kind of transformation, it's showing potentially it's not broke so much as it is not right. So it's not so much fix it as it is change it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is bringing that growth mindset out of people for those people who it is potentially within them anyway.
Yeah. Just to bring us back to, my job is to bring us back to the theme which we're doing, but in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly, in terms of upskilling, onboarding, and those kind of people-related elements, what's worked really well in your experience, in your different experiences, what's required a tweak, and where did you actually need to go back to the drawing board because it didn't quite land in the way in which you thought it might?
So we've touched on it earlier. It's that commitment and sticking to things, and in the same way that you have to sometimes make tough decisions about people and people that you value in so many ways, it's making tough decisions potentially about stopping people doing things. I think sometimes it can feel like a really harsh thing to cut something off or to stop people doing something in a particular way, particularly if it's something that they are really comfortable in doing and really feel happy doing. But in those circumstances, to go from X to Y, you've got your plan A, and as much as you want to have a plan B for that, the old way being the plan B can be really, really detrimental to that, I guess, is one thing that I would cite as a thing. It's an easy thing because everybody knows it. That's how everybody already does things. But the longer you maintain that as a viable alternative option, the more it remains the option, and it makes the transformation more difficult the longer you cling to legacy, I guess. Is one thing I would.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think we can test some of these things early as well. We were working with a client 12 months ago. We started the process with them, and they themselves had made a technological choice in terms of the direction that they wanted to go in for one of their applications. And one of their questions to me, I remember, was, how do you take cynical people on that pathway with you, and how do you differentiate between who those people are and those people that want to go on that journey and that upskilling journey with you? And the practical thing that we could do and that we could offer was to put in place a rapid delivery kind of training course that we put all of their people through right from day one. And we were able to play back to the client the engagement that each and every person had with that course content. And at the end of it, we were able to run some tests and see how people had responded to it. And then get a sense of how much further the upskilling path needed to go on, i.e. could we hit the ground running with the team that's there? Do we need to do more? Do we need to invest more? And actually, there are some people, back to a previous point I made, that are just there's not a willingness to engage there. And be honest with that client and test some of those things early doors. We don't often get the opportunity to do that. We've kind of got to prove as we go, and we've got to fail too many times. And we talk about failure as a good thing, and it is in many respects, as long as you learn from it. But if there are opportunities to test in a real life situation, then trying to find out what some of those test marks could be, I think is really important to how quickly you can begin to move from day one.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sometimes it's that testing approach is brilliant to try and get that sort of early doors feedback, that really sort of proving out, is this working, isn't it? But that's where the key point is for me. You've got to kind of look at this objectively and think, I'm trying this. This is an approach.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like in the case of if you have a consistently disengaged population of people who might get badged cynical or whatever.
Yeah.
Why is that? It's as much to look inwardly and go, are we doing this right to really hit these people? are we really understanding why they're so steadfast in their approach to this? Because it's very few people are malicious. Very few people are trying to cause harm. They're trying to protect what they have. It's a human instinct, right? People are fearful of things that will change the thing that they believe is successful and good and right and happy for them. And so it's very rarely a malicious act to say to stand there and say, I don't want to learn this thing, or this is. It's, are we doing a good job at communicating why the purpose is? Are we doing a good job at addressing what the benefits of this will be?
Sure.
So it's a whole circle thing for sure.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah.
A lot of what we're talking, it is all about change, isn't it? I mean, that's transformation. That's a kind of a simpler way of putting it. And we all find ourselves in that change environment all the time, basically. And that's quite a tiring place to be, I suggest, and lots going on. And so I'd love to hear why you enjoy that, why you what do you love about it, and maybe what are the kind of what do you find hard about it, what keeps you up at night?
Go on, James.
That sounded like a tough question. Yeah. Do you know what? I think we talked before about people and the choice of organisation and company that they work for, and I think we all agreed that not every organisation is right for every single person.
Yep.
And I think that's where some of how you've introduced that concept there, Simon, is that's maybe what it boils down to in a lot of instances. Some people really like the fast-paced, the constant change, the variety of work. And in our business, come and join in, because, that's kind of the land and landscape of which we operate. Other people like the constant, they like the stability, they like a slower pace where change is not going to happen all the time. And that's for a different set of people, and that is absolutely fine. And differentiating between those choices, I think is as long as we recognise that what brings the best out of people and do the best by those people, it's okay to lose good people in those circumstances, because ultimately, you can do the best by them by making them happy at work, then you're not really going to work. You're going to a place of happiness. And I say that a little bit cliched, but I think I genuinely mean that by if you enjoy what you do, then you enjoy the nature of what you do. And I enjoy the fast-paced, ever-changing landscapes that we have to deal with and the different problems. It's not for everyone, and I think we all accept that.
Sure. I guess that's where it becomes really, really difficult, is when you've got a really entrenched organisation, one with a long timeline. I always find it hard using the words like history and legacy. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not national heritage, we're all businesses, right? It's but that kind of previous experiences, and when it has been a particular way for a particular length of time, even though it will have changed over time, it just won't felt like change because it'll have been so minor and so iterative. Again, 5 years ago to now, everyone's living in a completely different way, right? But for those kind of people for whom they don't feel like change has happened, in some ways, saying a transformation is happening can be the most beneficial thing in the world, because everybody knows what to expect. We know there will be change. We know that it will be significant, all those kind of things. It can also be kind of a really difficult thing, and this is why we're talking on this podcast, right? It can be a difficult thing to manage the expectations of people, particularly if it is in a more entrenched way. For me, I love it. I embrace, advocate. I go for change whenever possible. I'm somebody who, if I go to a restaurant, I never order the same thing that I've had before. If I'm going to a place, I never go to the same place I've been before. But that's just me and probably ADHD, if I'm entirely honest, because that's how I live my life. So yeah, it suits me. However, and I think anyone working in the people space, you have to appreciate exactly what you're saying there, James. Everyone is different, and it's kind of understanding that and being as empathetic towards that, and realising that just because I like running off and doing different things does not mean that I can expect that or should expect that of others.
You've just made me realise that I operate entirely differently in work and out of work, because I always go to the same restaurant and choose the same thing. So.
And what is that, James?
We won't go there.
All right. Okay. So I think something that kind of joins what you both are saying is actually, it's really important. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really important to have a supportive work environment where all the employees feel safe, feel valued, it's inclusive, and so on. That's a very easy thing to say. That's not necessarily an easy thing always to achieve. Adam, how do you do that?
So I think supportive is one thing, and I think HR roles, people roles can definitely fall one of two ways. Traditionally, HR will be kind of a place that you don't ever want to go to. It's, if you're getting called into HR, it's like getting into the headmaster's office, right? Disciplinarian, you're only there if you're in trouble. The other side of things is a people team, as some might think, is all fluffy and nice, and you'll never get into trouble, and anything I ask you for, you will do for me. The reality is somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And it is, when we talked about before about commercial roles, I think people roles are the most commercial roles that you can do, because it's balancing what you need to get from the business by the people that work for you or the people that you want to work for you. So for me, a truly supportive environment is about making it clear, being transparent, and saying, you need to do this thing in this way because we have set ourselves up to commit to doing it this way. In return, you will get this. So it's the give and the get. And for me, I think most humans can make decisions if they understand why they're there and what they might get out of it in return. Either both as a kind of short-term extrinsic reward, and then internally the long-term intrinsic reward. So for me, that's support. It's making it clear what you've got on offer here.
Thank you. James, would you perspectives on that?
Yeah, no, I can only,
hard to
I
beat.
don't think there's much to build on that. Yeah,
So sorry.
No, I think you've summed it up perfectly. I don't think I've got much of a build. Yeah, no.
All right. Okay. So this is the final question. Actually, I've got one more question after this, but that's a much easier one. So when was the moment you thought, you're a digital leader, I can do this? You know, I've got this. And on the flip side, maybe you'd like to share this one as well. You can choose not to. When was the moment when you went, oh dear, I've got this wrong. I definitely can't do this. Because we all have those moments, probably more so than the kind of former. But yeah, anything you'd like to share?
I think the digital leader bit, I think that boils down back to me that there's never an end to it. I think take the small wins when they come along. Because it's that builds confidence, it builds trust, it builds belief from those around you and within yourself. And I think that's what I would take from it. I don't think there's been a singular moment that I'd look back and gone, it was that. I think it's the small things and taking the time to recognise some of those small wins as well, not only for yourself, but making sure those that you work with, they too recognise those small moments, because we can easily forget about them and move on to the next thing, especially at the pace at which we operate. So, yeah, it's that one for me.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm a great lover of sort of looking out for signals in everything, and like really taking the time to explicitly look for what's going on, rather than what people are saying, but like what weren't they doing before that they're now doing, and it's that kind of thing. So it's when, for me, the moments of success have been people who a year ago were finding it really difficult to understand concepts or to kind of get on board with why something might happen, and then a year later they're actually driving, wanting to do certain things. You know, why aren't we doing stand-up? It's been ages since we've done a retro. Those kind of comments, and it's like that for me. That's when you know you've got it, because they are operating it's not just something that they are doing, it's something they are living.
Yeah.
That's what I love. And so when you see those positive signals, and then I guess on the converse, it's the opposite side of things. So you think where I'm there thinking, I've really articulated this well. I've really made it clear why we're doing this kind of thing. I've really made it clear what this is for. And then somebody goes, "What's this meeting for again?" And you're like,
kills you inside. Yeah.
"Right, got it. Okay."
Keep going.
But it's like, it's not them, it's me, and it's kind of right. We have to do something different, and that's the beauty of transformation, of change. Everything, there is no right way.
Yeah.
And I often say there is no wrong path with anything. The only path that is wrong is one that you cannot mentally recover from and turn around from, because otherwise you just keep going and you try something new, and that's
Very
what
wise.
it all comes down to.
Very wise. Cool. Before we wrap up then, so I didn't tell you about this, Adam, so apologies.
It's all
So
right.
we have AND titles in
Yeah.
So James, your AND title is
Sunderland fanatic, you'll be hardly surprised.
Right, okay.
So Adam, if you were to have an AND title, what would your AND title be?
Oh, it'd be
It's harder, isn't it?
So it's like something that you are a fan of, or something that you're
Yeah.
known for, that kind
something
of
that
thing.
you're passionate about. That
something
kind of
I'm-
represents your personal life.
I think it would either have to be something to do with somebody who can select the right font for any kind of job,
Okay.
which is a bit weird.
Niche, yep.
Or it's going to be something to do with crisps.
Really?
Oh, good Lord, I love crisps.
Are you just
All
crisps, full
crisps,
stop?
all crisps.
Okay.
But I have found that over my times, and this isn't, you can have this one all day long, the greatest leveler you will ever get is talking about snacks with people. If you are ever in doubt of how to break the ice or how to introduce a new person to the team, snacks. Talk about
There's
snacks,
one
because
thing
everyone
I
has
take
an
away
opinion.
from this podcast.
Exactly, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Adam, on that bombshell, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That's everything for this edition of The Good, the Bad and the Ugly of Digital Transformation. Thank you again to Adam and James as our guests, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please follow or subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode to enjoy. Thank you. And Digital is on a mission to close the digital skills gap. We do that through working with our clients to deliver digital transformation through better upskilling and reskilling.